Good evening, my name is Jim Conlan and welcome to our special Munster Hurling Championship preview show on RCB Radio Sport West Clare, live at 92.5 and 94.8 FM and online at www.rcb.ie and on our YouTube channel RCB Sport. I'm delighted to be joined this evening by a cast of Munster Hurling greats, Munster Hurling legends. We have representatives from all of the five hurling counties that are taking part in the 2020 Munster Hurling Championship. First of all, we have Eamonn Corcoran from Tipperary. Eamonn has won 3 National Hurling Leagues, one All-Ireland and one All-Star. Then next of all, we have Stephen Lucey, a dual star for Limerick, played over 14 years, hurled at full back, was on the GPA hurling team of the year in 2007. Next up then we have Ken McGrath, 15 years, played for Waterford, 4 Munster titles, 1 National Hurling League and 3 All-Stars. Then we have Jamesie O'Connor, who played for 12 years for Clare, 3 Munster titles, 2 All-Irelands and 4 All-Stars. And lastly, we have Tomas Mulcahy, 11 years for Cork, 5 Munster titles, 3 All-Irelands, 1 National Hurling League and 2 All-Stars. And I suppose I'm going to first of all come to you, Eamonn, in terms of, I'm just going to ask you, first of all, the club championship in Tipperary, what stage are you at there? And what has been the reaction among the Tipperary hurling public to the club being on before club championship being on before the county? Has it been a real sort of breath of fresh air, and has it really delivered a high quality championship? And are Tipperary going to see the benefits, do you think, of it coming into this Munster Inter-County Hurling Championship?
Yeah, Jim, I suppose it's been very positive. Anyone that saw the county final there last Sunday between Lockmore and Killidangan, it just summed up the excitement the whole way through. Obviously, Killidangan coming out on top with the last puck of the game, but it's been very positive right through. I think the big thing for every club player out there, they got to train with their county colleagues, and I saw it firsthand in my own club. I was managing JK Brackens, and we had the county lads in training all year, and it just gave a huge lift to everyone. Look, it's been a very, very strong championship. I think it is all thinking now about the split season, because just to have the inter-county lads training with the club lads, it just gave a massive lift. And I would have thought we probably had our best club championship for years this year, and it just came down to the wire last Sunday with Killidangan coming over the line. But there were so many competitive games, even when we got to the last round of the groups. Out of the 16 teams, there was 13 of them still in with a chance of getting to the quarter final, which you wouldn't have seen for years. But from speaking to inter-county players and club players and managers alike, everyone would be in favour of probably a split championship going forward. And I think we'll see the benefit of the players coming into the inter-county season. But look, it's been unprecedented. All everyone wanted to do was get out and do a bit of hurling. We were locked up for long enough, and look, it's still uncertain times, and I suppose everyone is a bit cautious of what way this inter-county championship is going to go. But I think we've been off to a great start from a club point of view.
I suppose Eamonn has new players come to light in this championship. And I suppose in terms of the club player as well, I suppose you mentioned being a club manager. I presume like we had in Clare here, it was run off fairly quick. I suppose it was game week by week. Was it alternated between football and hurling? So I presume players knew their schedule, knew when they were going to be out. And I suppose it was that's what players want in the heat of the summer, games coming thick and fast and no delays or no waits in or around games. And I suppose was that the case in Tipperary?
Yeah, they played off obviously the football and the hurling, and there's a number of dual clubs out there. Lockmore, Castlehiney, I suppose it's people thought dual clubs couldn't do it, and this year they've contested the senior final and they're in the senior football final next Sunday, so it probably gave a chance for dual clubs again, week in, week out. In Tipperary. But like, there's some players actually put their hands up throughout the championship. I would have said the 2 Flynns for Killidangan this year are definitely going to probably see some game time in the championship. Jake Morris had a very good championship, and John Maher for Lockmore played centre back last Sunday. He's on the football panel, so I'd say Lee might be bringing him in and the way he's played throughout the championship. So like, a few lads have put their hands up, and then obviously from the other side, the guys that were playing in the championship last year, like John O'Dwyer, probably only got 20 minutes of club hurling, has really suffered from injuries, so he's been a loss, and it'll be interesting to see will he get back in time. But a big plus, I suppose, in the championship this year was to see Bonner Maher back from Lara. he got a serious injury last year and he was back playing clubs. So look, some lads have put their hand up to get game time, and other lads, I suppose, are probably fighting with fitness at the moment to be ready. But I think every player got through the championship without any serious injury from an inter-county point of view, which is good news in Tipperary.
I suppose, Stephen, if I can bring you on to yourself now, in terms of the Limerick Hurling Championship and in terms of the reaction among the Limerick public in terms of the club on before the county, what was the reaction to the standard of the Limerick Hurling Championship? Was there a great appetite amongst the club scene, having the inter-county players back, and was it probably, as Eamonn mentioned, at Tipperary, he felt it was one of the best championship in years in Tipperary. How was it like in Limerick?
I'd have to go along with that for sure. I think the GAA public in general were ravenous for training and matches to come back on. During the lockdown, I think people were starved for matches to look at. I don't know how many times I looked at the old games on TG Cahir. Tomas was running around there with the ball there, and back in the 80s against Galway, they lashing the shit out of each other. There was some great games, you really miss it. Like, when you don't have something, you really, really miss it. So when teams went back training, I couldn't get over the numbers. Like, even the kids, everyone was back in the field. Parents were all back in the field watching it. I think that hunger carried through then to the matches. The county board ran it very well, I felt. They changed the format. So usually in the hurling, there's 2 groups of 6, Premier Intermediate, then there's 1 group of 8. And then the intermediate, there's 2 groups of 6 again. So instead of having that, you had to cut it down. So it went to like 4 groups of 3 or groups of 4. So the way they did it then was 3 rounds of hurling championship, or 3 weeks of hurling championship, then 3 weeks of football, back to 3 weeks of hurling, and then 3 weeks of football again, which is nearly coming to an end next week. So it was all ran off in time. Thankfully, there was no lockdown like happened in Kildare, Laois and Offaly. The standard of it, I thought, was very good. I go along with what Eamonn said. Clubs love having their county players there. It gives everybody a real lift, because these are the guys you look up to, day in, day out with the county team. The young people want to emulate them. Even the younger lads coming on, like the 17 and 18 year olds, would even idolise these fellas playing with the county. And then when they're part of your club and you're training with them week in, week out, it gives teams a real boost. So I felt that was excellent. The standard then as well, I think, improved. We didn't get to any games, because the supporters weren't allowed to go, but there was a lot of it streamed. And I thought the standard went very well. The senior championship, I think there's a handful of teams in Limerick that are around the same standard. I think it was the 4th year or something in a row that the same 4 teams got to the semi-final. I don't know how healthy that is in general, but it's up to the other teams to get up to that level. The final itself then last week, Napier gave a masterclass. It didn't happen for Doon on the night. I know they're bringing through a lot of younger lads there. There's a lot. I think they finished the semi-final with 5, 17 or 18 year olds on the field. They were missing Richie English and they were missing Dara Donovan. And another player, I don't know, was it Barry Murphy or Micheál Ryan, went off after 20 minutes. He had a finger injury. So that didn't go well for them. But at the same time, Napier were missing Shane Dowling and Kevin Downs. But it was a fantastic performance by them to win a county final. 27 points, the highest winning margin, I think, ever in a Limerick County Championship. It didn't reflect the difference between the 2 teams. It was just a really, really good day for Napier and not so much for Doon. I think their heads, the game was over in the final quarter, and they dropped it a bit. But all in all, I thought it was a good championship. Getting back to your point on whether there should be a split season, I think the wind is blowing that way from everybody, supporters, media, players, and the CPA, GPA, and the GA. So I think it'll go that way.
And Stephen, lastly, in terms of the club championship as well, Eamonn mentioned about a few players in Tipperary putting their hand up and maybe changing the mindset of Liam Sheedy, who probably wouldn't have been in his plans earlier on in the year. Was there any sort of players in the Limerick championship that would have given food for thought for John Kiley and said, in terms of probably have hit form at the right time?
Well, I know John Kiley said to the players when they were splitting up for the club championship that they had to stand out. They had to perform and shine for their club. So they all got that instruction. He was enthused by the performances of some of them, like Napier were absolutely bang on. David Dempsey hurled out of his skin last week, and Peter Casey. And they both hurled very, very well. And they looked very, very fit and sharp. So that augurs well for Limerick. Also with Kildima Palaskindry won the Premier Intermediate. They're gone up senior, and Kyle Hayes was the captain. And he was excellent for them, flying it. He was scoring all around him, playing in the full forward line, but drifting out the field. And Darren O'Connell, who joined the panel this year and played a number of league games with Limerick earlier on in the year. You'd hardly remember it now, it's so long ago. So much water has gone under the bridge. But he's been excellent for the last couple of years. And he could be an option for the year coming ahead. John Kiley did also say something that he wanted to find 4 players in the club championship. Now, to be honest, I don't know if he's found 4. Certainly 4 that will make the team or be thereabouts coming on. I don't know. Like, they've been watching the matches. I haven't. But I certainly haven't seen it anyway. But I do think some of the players that were on the panel should or could step up. Like Darren is one fella there. Who else did I wrote down there? Will O'Donoghue. He showed leadership qualities on the field and off the field. He's safe, solid, and secure in the backs. Like, so he might nail down that midfield partnership with Cian Lynch. Barry Nash has held his hand up again at the start of the year. Again, another option for wing back. Paddy O'Loughlin was captain of UCC. They won Fitzgibbon. I think he was captain, Tomas, was he? In the Fitzgibbon from Kilmallock. But he's another option for the half back line. And also one other fella then as well who didn't have such a great year last year was Seamus Flanagan. He was full forward the year they won the All-Ireland. Bit of a dip in form last year, and he's come back into his fit and injury free, and he's hungry. So he was out of the loop a bit last year. So he'll be another guy. So maybe not newer fellas onto the panel, but certainly fellas who have stepped up that are already on the panel.
I suppose, Jamesie, if I can come to you now in terms of the Clare Championship, I know we had a new format this year, and we're very much a dual county here in Clare in terms of footballing and hurling. And what was your own thoughts? I know you were at a good lot of the games. I saw you at a few of them there as well. What was your thoughts in the championship?
Well, no more than what the lads have said. It seems to have ran pretty seamlessly, Jim. We're a dual club, intermediate in both. Unfortunately, beating the semi-final of the hurling and the footballers in the final this weekend. So, yeah, I mean, look at the county final is the Mills. Caught Ballyea in the semi-final. Tony Kelly in great form. Niall Deasy himself put up a massive score for Ballyea between them, but. The Mills are guys, our team with plenty of hurlers, and apparently there's massive hype out there this week, obviously ahead of the county final against the Bridge, who are the neighbouring parish. So very interesting to see how that goes. The Bridge beat a Rogue in the other semi-final, and a Rogue had chances. Could have pipped the Bridge, and that would have been a novel final pairing. In terms of the overall standard, Jim, I'm not sure. If we have the same depth, that we might have seen in Tipperary and Limerick, and I think it'll be a lot of familiar faces taking the field for Clare again this season. I suppose that's one of the things I suppose that no one could have foreseen in terms of the way the year's panned out. We had a very, very good start to the league, and we're going well, and maybe it's going to be hard to see how we're going to regain that momentum again, and how we're going to go. But that's all. Look, that's all ahead of us. But yeah, look, as I said, it's been really, I think, so important to get hurling back. And I think, as the lads have alluded to, everyone was, mad for road. I was involved with our own team intermediates. There was a great buzz of training. Involved under 14s, and at underage level there was a great buzz. And I think certainly, we've almost stumbled upon a solution. Maybe nearly by accident, to this whole club versus county thing, and it's something that obviously they're going to have to give serious weight to going forward. And as I said, look, I was involved with 4 different teams, Jim. A couple of camogie teams. I've a couple of daughters playing, and I seem to be in the field 5 and 6 nights a week. But overall, I mean, look, I really enjoyed it, and I think, as Stephen said there, we appreciated it all the more once it was taken away from us earlier in the year.
Yeah, and I suppose, Jamesie, in terms of the championship structure in Clare, the first round game was a bit meaningless sort of such, but from there on then it was very helter-skelter in terms of it was do or die sort of format. And I suppose in the intermediate as well, we saw the breakthrough of Scariff coming through, and a youngster like Mark Rogers, who was a very good minor. He was outstanding for Scariff this year. I suppose the likes of David Reedy is showing form again, coming back from injury. And I suppose Aaron Shanahan, he seems to have put his injury problems behind him. I suppose with the loss of John Conlan out for the year, I suppose it's going to... The likes of Aaron Shanahan is probably going to play a bigger role than if John Conlan was there, I presume.
Yeah, Duke John is obviously a massive loss. Jim and Peter Duggan. I mean, they were probably arguably our two biggest ball winners in that forward line, and neither of those guys are going to be available to Brian. So, we're going to have to find a way to replace them. But certainly guys did stand up in the club championship. And listen, Mark Rogers was outstanding for the minors a couple of years ago. He has that X factor, that flair, and whether he's physically ready for it or not, it remains to be seen. But he's certainly somebody that has to be in Brian's plans, and he's really a guy to look out for in the future. So, hopefully we see him on the field this year, because I said he has that class, that ability to get goals, and he's certainly, along with Keane Gallivan, I think, who's also back in the panel, was captain of the Flanders Hearts team last year. He's another outstanding prospect that is going to the future in the Clare jersey. So, yeah.
Just one other guy to mention you there, Jamesie, and I suppose he's another sort of Flannan sort of graduate. I suppose Diarmuid Cahill, he was another lively quality minor in the last year. He probably was outstanding for Corfin. Probably 2 or 3 years to go maybe for Diarmuid, but he's certainly one on the radar as well.
He is, yeah, and he's he's sitting in a class in front of me 5 days a week, so he's not quite ready, I think, for senior in the county just yet. But no, look at he's from a hurling family, quality fella. His brother is no bad player either, and they produced the goods for Corfin in the intermediate championship, and obviously they came unstuck, I think, at the quarterfinal stage. But yeah, he's another one for the future. So look, there is talent there. But whether we have the same depth of talent that Limerick and Tipperary appear to have, remains to be seen. But certainly, crunch match coming up with Limerick on the 25th of October, and I think we're all looking forward to it.
I suppose, Tomas, if I can come on to you now, in terms of the club versus inter-county, what was the reaction in terms of Cork and the Cork sort of hurling scene, and what was the standard of the Cork Hurling Championship as a lifelong Cork supporter, and you would have been a Cork player, and you would have been at all the sort of Cork games? What was your reaction comparing the Cork Championship to previous years? And did you think there's certainly an appetite for it, club on before county? Tomas? Can you hear us?
Hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
You can hear me, yeah?
I can hear you now.
I got to Ken McGrath. I was just saying there, based on listening to the lads, sure, we have no chance in Cork. Everything is so good in Limerick and so good in Clare. I don't know, will we turn up at all? No, I just from a Cork perspective, I think things have turned out totally different, right? I mean, there was a lot of debate last year because we've reduced the championship from 16 teams down to 12. There was a new format put in place in terms of the championship. It was 3 groups of 4. And out of the 4 teams in each group, it was 3 to qualify. But because of what happened with COVID-19 and because the way it has actually all been squeezed in now, I think we're falling upon it by accident as well, that only 2 teams came out of the group of 4, which made it very, very competitive from the start. So if you lost your first match, you were in a bit of bother. And I think the Cork Championship needed that. I think we had a bit more needle to our games. We hadn't played over the years. You play 1 match in April and you didn't play again until August. I think it was very, very unfair in the club system. It was very unfair in terms of intercounty guys, because if they're playing through summer, then to go back to your club, I think this has been a revelation for Cork, to be honest with you. I go to my club. I come from my club field tonight. We're in preparation for the county semi-final on Saturday night, and you just see the freshness and the appetite of Patrick Horgan and Steve MacDonald and Robert Downey being part of the club scene, right? And eagerly looking forward to games next weekend, and have done so all summer. And like the lads themselves, they know them at times. You play into county, it's very hard at times to go back to your club and be fully fresh and be fully ready for the game as well, because he was coming fast and thick. This time round, I think, is brilliant. And I think hopefully the GA will take a leave out of the book of what's happened in terms of the split championship. And I know I got a bit of stick during the year to say that I prefer to see club rather than county first. And I still state that. I think if you're an inter-county manager, it's the best preparation that you could see And as Stephen mentioned about John Kiley telling guys, lads, you got to perform with your club before you come back to the inter-county scene. That puts a little bit of edge on guys. But also, it's for an inter-county manager, we listen to the best man that has been out there for the last 30 years, Brian Cody, and what he tell you. I'll pick guys in form. I pick them on form in their games, and I pick them on form in training. And I think, like for the likes of Kieran Kingston as well, a couple of guys have actually come up to the forefront this year in terms of their performance with club. And you just hope they're given the opportunity. Maybe not this time round because we're playing at a different time of the year, but if you start a club championship in April that finishes in June and that you go into an inter-county series after that, you're seeing guys playing at the best time of the year when we all want to see hurling played. And I think it's been a revelation. It's been very, very good in Cork, I must say. Obviously, it's a pity. I mean, some of the best performers have been kind of the streamlined commentators as well. They've been a joy to listen to as well. Great crack. And it's a pity the crowds haven't been able to get out there to watch the matches. But look, we all got to accept what's there, but I think it's definitely the route forward for the GA, particularly club versus intercounty.
I suppose, Tomas, in terms of in the league since Cork were probably finding their team, and they probably just had settled on a team before COVID-19 had struck. Do you think it's opened up the door for guys further down the panel in the manager's thoughts there in terms of the starting 15? And has there guys really shone to prominence throughout the championship that maybe towards the start of the league you would have said, well, he's going to find it hard to get game time, but now he's hitting peak form and he might springboard himself because of the club championship onto a starting position into this Cork team? Yeah,
but I mean, Cork needs success at intercounty level. We by our standards and standards of the past, we've been down too long, and we need to win a Munster title and we need to win in Ireland. We haven't won since 2005, so it's a long, long time, and every year that it goes on, it gets more difficult, right? So you would think there is a good panel of players there, but you'd hope that there's guys pushing in the wings as well, right? Maybe, Aaron's own play, Glen Rovers on Saturday night, a guy that's been doing very well for him and kind of been on the fringes of the Cork scene is a guy called Robbie Flynn, right? He's done very, very well with his club team. Come to the forefront. Blackrock Hurling Club are in the county semi-final as well. They've had a lot of success around their age level minor and under 21, but they haven't a massive representation that you would have seen from a Blackrock team in the past, where Jim Cashman, Tom Cashman, Dermot McCurtain, Alan Brown, John Brown, Fergal Ryan, all these guys graced the field with Cork, and they haven't had that representation. But there's a couple of guys coming through there, I think, could get their opportunity as well. Michael O'Halloran there the last time on the fringes, scored 8 points from play in their quarter-final match, and was very, very prominent as well. So hopefully, look, I think competition is good. Some guys maybe that have been there for the number of years, and that was the big disadvantage I felt with Cork, and it was probably the same around the country. If you played one match in April and you didn't see your club players in action again until August, you've an inter-county season gone in between it, and nobody knows the former players. I think this has been different. We've seen guys week in, week out, and they had to perform. And if you're true to and you're honest, you pick the best players based on performance. I suppose if I can come on to you now, Ken, in terms of the Waterford Championship, we've heard the thoughts of all other sort of 4 counties. What has been the reaction in terms of Waterford, and what's the standard been like in the club championship? And overall, what's your opinion on it? Are you, like the guys, are you very much in favour of the club, a split season and the club being on before the inter-county, club championship being on before inter-county?
Yeah, definitely a split season. I think, look, I managed my own club for 2 years, 2015, 2016, and not having your county players is so hard to even play standard challenge games you want to play at times, because you're hindered who you have or what your training sessions can even be like, So to have just a split season, I think, is definitely the way forward, and definitely captured the imagination of Waterford people. Like all the lads said, we couldn't go to the games. We were 500 yards from Welsh Park up Mount Sion watching streaming games and watching the match in the clubhouse, and you couldn't go to a stadium, which was a bit crazy, But overall, it was there's really like 2 championships in Waterford, lads. There's Ballygunner and there's the rest, and everyone's probably competing against each other to get to that final spot. Probably in the back of your minds, knowing really that you might have much a chance against Ballygunner because they're so far ahead of teams at the moment. They're so professional, so they're so just probably confident how they're going about things. It's like 2 championships, to be honest with you, you know.
Yeah, and in terms of players within the Waterford hurling panel that would have been probably predominant starters during the league, has there been many promising? We know Waterford had a very successful underage system in terms of 21s and minors. Have many of those guys shone to light in the Waterford Championship that have maybe given food for thought, or might be parachuted into the Waterford team that are probably coming of age now and probably developing, or other guys further down the panel that mightn't have got much opportunity during the springtime, but had very good club campaigns and obviously might have propelled themselves into the tops of the management?
Yeah, look, I suppose 2016 was the when they're under 21 Ireland won. I think they bet every team fairly comfortably that year. You know, that a lot of them lads are 24, 25 now, so they're probably into their prime. They should be well established at this stage, you know. So now it's a time for a lot of them, say, established groups to deliver, really, you know. Probably the most standout player in Waterford at the moment is Dessie Hutchinson. It was his first year back. He started a couple of games in the league. He was at Brighton there for a few years, professional footballer. He's unbelievable fitness. As James was going, some of the players up in Clare, he's an X factor about him. There's something about him. He goes for goal. He takes players on. There's something about him that you'd love to see on a warm summer's day. Obviously, the championship is totally different this year. Then Munster Club hurling really for an inter-county championship, which is going to be totally different what we're used to, you know. So, he was a standout player. Callum Lyons, who played championship last year, was brilliant for Bide off floor, absolutely brilliant. He stood up, he kind of led his team to an Eastern Intermediate championship final. He was absolutely brilliant. He seemed to have grown again. Micheál Carney up and Bide off upper was great as well. But they were probably the 3 players that you'd be kind of saying will really push on and join that kind of core group that have been there probably 7 or 8 years. Pádraig Manny was standout again for Ballygunner. He always is. Philly Manny was very good, even though Philly's not in the panel. But I think really we're not going to get too many players that'll make a real impact in Munster Championship, bar the 3 or 4 that I mentioned. But it's a different championship. Like, I played enough Munster Club Championship games. We played against Jamesie a good few times. It's different hurling. It's going to be a different inter-county championship this year, and whoever team adapts to it the best. I know, look, the 2 Munster Championship games are in Thurles. That pitch is going to be good, but if you've got a day like today, a blustery, windy, cold day, it's different hurling. And well, look, it's still a pleasure to go watch it in a few weeks' time after the year we're after having. I mean, people can't wait to see it, you know. But it's going to be totally different.
Yeah, I suppose, guys, we'll bring it on now to the main event itself, the Munster Hurling Championship. And first up, on Sunday, October the 25th at 3:45, we have the quarter-final. We have Clare versus Limerick in Simple Stadium, Thurles. I suppose, first of all, we have a Tipperary man, a Tipperary supporter waiting in the wings that is going to be looking on with great interest as Tip await the winners. So we'll come to you, Eamonn, first of all. What are your thoughts on Clare versus Limerick?
Yeah, look, I suppose sorry, can you hear me, Jim? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, if you took the early league form there, like Clare started off very good under Brian, but I just think Limerick are probably, not just saying it now, but they're still the team to beat. I go back to last year against Kilkenny. I know there was only a puck of the ball in, and in fairness to Brian Cody, Kilkenny team, they really got the intensity levels up and played in your face hurling against Limerick. But if that had to go to a replay, I could see Limerick coming out on top, and they're probably the team Tip didn't want to face in the final would have been Limerick. So, like, looking at that game, the stage Limerick is at, I would find it hard to see Clare getting over the line there, because I just think that Limerick team at the moment, and Stephen alluded to it there, the likes of Kyle Hayes and those coming through, and you go right down through the team, like they're a seasoned team. I think they'll be there or thereabouts. But look, then you're Brian Lohan over Clare, Brian being Brian, like the steel is going to be in them there, and he'll have eaten thorny wire before they go out, so they'll be ready for the big battle. But Ken spoke about it there. I just think it's going to be, there's winter hurling and summer hurling, and being a backman, I always love the winter. I hate the top of the ground stuff, so it'll be interesting to see the hurlers that can adapt to it. And we spoke about Semple Stadium, but there's still going to be, if it's a wet, windy day and in soft ground, it's not every hurler adapts to it, so it'll be interesting to see. But look, if I was going to put my head in the block, I can't see Limerick being bet.
I suppose, Stephen, you already got the support of your near neighbours, Tipperary, there, talking you up to the max. Are you fairly confident as well? You go along with Eamonn, sort of thinking that you'll be meeting them in a semi-final and partaking of Clare in the quarter-final?
The commentator's curse there from Eamonn. Look, it's a unique year, and this isn't summer hurling. Limerick play a lot of possession-based hurling developed by Paul Kinnerk. So if you're going to be playing in October, November, that's going to come unstuck once teams start putting pressure on you, and there'll be a wet ball. If there's a wind and rain, it'll be harder to implement that. So how will Limerick cope with that? There's a question mark there. Also, it's a derby against Clare. Brian Lohan, he's a player I looked up when I was a young fella. I tried to emulate. He was the guy I wanted to emulate at fullback. And he's as tough as nails. And so is Sean Tracy, their coach. And he coached our club for a couple of years now. So he'll have them spitting bullets ready for that match. So I would say, though, that I agree with Jamesie. John Conlan and Peter Duggan are massive losses for Clare up front. Their size will be even more pronounced, their loss, due to the heavy ground and the importance of winning balls. So, you know, and you can't just say, you can't take league form in the spring into account either, because it's so long ago. So there's a lot of unknowns. Maybe we'll win by a goal, 15-14 in a penalty shootout.
Jamesie, would you settle for a penalty shootout now?
I think if you gave me a penalty shootout, yeah, I think I would take it. Yeah, listen, I think, look at what the lads have said. Limerick, for me, are the team to beat. You know, they look at, obviously they'll feel last year. You know, they'll have, I suppose, look at nightmares about that Kilkenny game, and even at the very end, I mean, you know, could have got something out of it. And, you know, they'll certainly look at it as one that got away. So I think there's probably a fierce resolve within that camp, you know, to put a second title on the board. And obviously the league form they've shown early in the season, you know how impressive that was. I think in terms of the depth they have, the physicality in their team, the power, for me, they tick all the boxes, and they're the team that everybody has to beat. So look, at Clare know they're up against it. But that said, like, Clare and Limerick, you know, form, history, all that can go out the window at times, because, you know, these players know each other inside out. Clare will certainly feel, you know, last year they didn't turn up. You know, Limerick bullied them. And there'll be a certain level of hurt about that, about, you know, how comprehensively, you know, Limerick beat them in the Gaelic grounds last year. So that's all in the mix as well. And, you know, it's a massive game, but it's a massive game, Jim, with the poison chalice at the end of it, because, you know, you have Tip waiting for you, obviously, and then Cork and Waterford potentially in the final. So, for me, I think the important thing for Clare is that they get a performance and they get something to build on. But, you know, if you're a betting man, without Peter Duggan, without John Conlan, at a time in the year when, you know, size, power, strength, ball-winning ability is really going to count, I just don't know if we have the weaponry, you know, to live with Limerick. So a performance, I think, is important, and something then to take on, you know, going forward. But I just can't see us at this point in time, you know, beating Limerick, and I think Tip will have their hands full in the semi-final going forward, you know, after that.
I suppose, Tomas, Clare under Brian Lohan, a new style of hurling. It's people would have quibbed an awful lot of time in the past that the ball wasn't going in fast enough to that Clare full forward line. Not this year. It's going in quick and fast into the likes of, we've seen the league, into the likes of Shane O'Donnell. We've seen Tony Kelly sometimes play a more advanced role, and you have the likes of forwards in there, Clare, inside the full forward line. If they get quick ball, they know how to put the ball into the back of the net as well. So do you think, obviously, maybe the style of the change in style of hurling that Clare are adapting this year could make this more a 50-50 game against Limerick?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I suppose new managers come into the fray and they want to stamp their own authority as well. And look, everybody knows how prolific Brian Lohan was as fullback, and how domineering he was as a fullback as well. But he was a leader in terms of the people that were around him, and I'm sure he's going to bring those qualities. And like, the one thing that I've been disappointed with Clare over the years, because of all the ability that they had at underage level, a minor and under 21, I think they failed to deliver. Maybe after 2013 winning the All-Ireland, I think they kind of failed to deliver. And a bit like my own county, I'd be a bit critical in terms of the game plan, too much of the short ball, when you have guys in key areas. And, you know, and I look at Kilkenny and I look at Conal Felley inside the full forward, and I look at TJ Reid, and I look at Seamus Callan with Tipperary, and whatever it is, Bubbles or John McGrath inside. And there's only one message in their mind: get the ball into these guys as quick as you can, and let them do the damage. Let them take care of possession, you know. And sometimes people say, oh, you want a nice ball down in front of them, has to bounce once before it goes into the hand and all that. These guys don't care whether it comes off the ear or it's down inside the high grass. Once you have the appetite and the willingness to go and win it, and I think we need to see some of that coming back into the inter-county scene. And I'm talking about my own county here as well, in terms of a bit more directness. And if Brian Lowe can bring that to Clare, it will show a difference in terms of where does he play Tony Kelly, how does he adapt with Tony Kelly, does he still just start dropping out as a centre forward out towards midfield, picking up breaking ball. But James, you mentioned those two guys, John Conlan, I mean, he was a big focus man inside at full forward, and Peter Duggan as well. Puck outs, an option for you, put the ball down top of his head, it's going to win the ball. And John Conlan inside, they're massive losses for them, to be honest with you. On the other side, I think Limerick are unfinished business. They'll be disappointed how it finished last year for them. They won't be happy we won All-Ireland. They have a team capable of winning for 2 or 3 years if they get another one under their belt. I mean, they are that good. They have a lot of talent coming through, and they play nice. I know Stephen mentioned they do a fair bit of sharp passing as well, and like that is the key as well. I mean, you can do a lot of that, but if the opposition cop on to what you're about and put a tactic in place where you slow you down and they close you down in terms of that sharp passing, it can make it very, very difficult if you don't have a plan B. But Limerick, when you look at the size and the strength and the caliber of these guys, I think they're going to be the team to beat this year.
I suppose, Ken, that doesn't really concern Waterford, because you won't meet the winners of Clare or Limerick. You won't see them until a Munster final at least. For a Waterford perspective, so you can sort of sit back and observe Limerick and Clare with a glass half full, as the saying goes. And what are your thoughts on that side of the draw? Clare versus Limerick, I suppose the derby element in it, the close neighbours, players. Interrelationships, players working with each other, going to school with each other, sharing houses in college, that sort of stuff that you always get between Clare and Limerick, and when one sees one doing really well, the other one normally is the first one to take it down.
When you're from Waterford, Jim, you're always a glass half full man. You have to be, you know. But no, I was on RD actually for the Clare Limerick game up in Cusick Park last year, and Clare were poor. The first 10 minutes to start the game well, as Jamesie said, but they were poor after that and bowed out very tamely that day against Limerick, you know, and Limerick really bossed them around the pitch. So you would think with Brian Lowe in charge, and Brian was as tough as nails, a brilliant hurler as well, but he led from the front and done everything right. Even his probably preparation outside of the game, he was very professional in how he done things, you know, so he'll have things spot on for the game. But I just feel with missing Peter Duggan and John Conlan, they're massive losses. The two boys, especially 2 years ago, were absolutely brilliant. You remember some of the scores the two lads got up in Croke Park in them unbelievable games against Galway. They're ball winners, they were athletes, they were full of confidence at the time. And I felt that was definitely a one that slipped away for Clare. And if they'd have picking up that to go with 2013, it probably would have fulfilled some of the potential that they undoubtedly have, you know. But to me, it's hard look beyond Limerick. I felt they probably were a bit overconfident playing Kilkenny last year. They started the game like, we'll be grand here, that look, we know how to hurl, we tip away, but you don't do that against the ball teams, Kilkenny, and Kilkenny tore into them from the start and probably went a bit too far ahead. Limerick clawed it back, but it was definitely, I'd say, it was a game that we're kicking ourselves after of getting our final and going for 2 in a row. So I'm sure they're training and they're playing with heart, and watch some of the scores in the county final last year from, as the lads were saying and Stephen said, from some of the players that weren't regulars that played the way they played. There's a huge abundance of talent there and a huge panel of players that are pushing, and that's what you need. And I suppose at times in Waterford over the years we've been lacking that. We always had a good decent 15, but it's just your 17, 18, 19, 20. And I feel in Limerick probably as far back as 23, 24 that are pushing beyond that 15. And Kilkenny had that for years and it drove everyone on, you know. So I just think it could be a tight game. It will be a tight game. But I just think definitely Limerick for me, we'll get the nod that day.
So the universal vote seems to be Limerick to emerge victorious. We'll move on now to the first of the semi-finals on Saturday, October the 31st. It's Cork versus Waterford in Simple Stadium. We'll come back to Tipperary perspective again. I suppose, Eamonn, you're in the opposite side of the semi-final. You get to watch that semi-final first. Cork versus Waterford, I suppose two teams hungry for success in Munster, hungry to sort of make the breakthrough. They've seen Tipperary and Limerick has sort of been so dominant in the last few years, but a great opportunity. The winner of this is in a Munster final, so it's a winner take all for either Cork versus Waterford. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think this is a much harder game to call. Obviously, Liam Cahill going down to Waterford. I would have heard with Liam over the years, and obviously did a huge job with Tip minors and 21s. He's a very direct guy. It's black and white with Liam, and I suppose you saw when he went into Waterford this year, he made some big calls early when he went in. But we're talking about different styles of hurling, and I'm not a weatherman or expecting huge storms or anything, but like there is going to be, the short game is going to struggle, I think, this year, and Cork will need to adapt their game because I think the prime example, if you talk winter hurling, and I don't want to go away from the point, but when you look at Ballygunner and Bursley last year in the club final, Ballygunner's short game was just completely broke down with the weather, and Bursley were more direct. So it depends who will adapt the style more. I know Liam Cahill, his style will be very, very direct at times, and that's the type of person he is. Mikey Beevan's with him down there, so it'll be interesting to see what style of hurling he brings since when he goes down there. But as I said, it's a hard one to call. Cork, I've been disappointed with Cork over the last number of years. Like it's been a long time since we've seen them really, really competing. But like on paper, they're a very, very strong outfit. I just think they'll need to adapt the style, probably more direct. And it's one that I just find it hard to call. But if I had to put my head in the block, I would tend to probably go, I don't know, just a gut feeling that Cork will get to the Munster final. I know Liam is a bit building to do Waterford after performance last year. I think it could be coming a bit early for Liam in his first year in there. So I go with Cork this time round.
And I suppose, Stephen, if I can come on to yourself, we all know the superstardom, the heroics that Patrick Horgan has produced down through the years for Cork. The one thing probably missing from his CV and his resume is that All-Ireland title, that elusive, or probably one of the most, aside from TJ Reid, probably one of the most consistent hurlers in the past decade. Especially in the inter-county scene. I suppose for Waterford and Liam Cahill, the big game plan will be try and minimise Horgan's influence, and obviously on frees as well. If you give Patrick Horgan a free anywhere on the field, it's effectively a score.
Yeah, that's true. There's the shades of the Joe Kennings with Galway for Patrick Horgan with Cork. Like, he's been so consistent and done so well with his county for so many years, and they're so close to getting it, but they just haven't got over the line. They've had the personnel down there. There's some fantastic players. There about 2 or 3 years ago when they brought on that bunch of young hurlers there, Dara Fitz and Mark Coleman and Shane Kingston and them, I thought that those were the players that were going to get them closer to the line. They had their struggles in the backs for a couple of years, and I think that was their Achilles heel, because they certainly had the talent, the forwards and the speed and the movement and the scorers to get the scores, but it was at the other end when they were in trouble. I'd say they've been kicking themselves the last 3 years. Certainly the match against Limerick in 18, the semi-final, they had that game wrapped up. Limerick didn't let up, like, and it was, went extra time, and the way it went, like. So I think with Kieran Kingston coming back, they kind of, I don't know, they want him to stay. I think he wanted to stay himself, but work precluded it. But he's back now again with, as you could say, unfinished business himself. And they all have unfinished business because they're mad for that All-Ireland. Cork people are surely hungry for that All-Ireland, and surely the players are as well. I don't know how to call this game. You have two new managers. Waterford, to me, I don't know what way they're going to be, but what players are going to be on the team, what positions are they going to be in. Liam Cahill has made those big calls. I was very surprised he dropped those lads without having seen them. Had he preconceived notions? What happened? Like, or did he just want to start with a clean slate, or what? I don't know. But what style of player are they going to bring? Like, it is championship, and it is. You could say it's knockout. Like, you have 2 chances, but it's still enough. There aren't too many chances, so you have to get it right. The conditions will play their part. We've all said it's going to be direct. It's going to have to be. I think Cork will come through, but you know, I wouldn't be surprised if again, if it'll be down. A lot of managers will be trying to put more steel. A lot of the counties have a lot of nice, skillful hurlers, good score takers, and good ball players. But a lot of the managers there are tough men, and they'll be trying to instill steel into it. So we might see different types of games this year, I think. So yeah, I think Cork will come through, but I don't know by how much. It'll be a small few scores maybe.
I suppose, Jamesie, one of the intriguing battles in this contest, obviously, is the midfield battle. Jamie Barron and Dara Fitzgibbon, I suppose, two outstanding hurlers, and two catalysts, the two prime engines, I'd say, the heartbeat of both sides. And that's a mouth-watering contest in itself, and probably a contest that'll have a big bearing on proceedings, because we know how influential both players are for their county. When Dara Fitzgibbon is flying on form, it means an awful lot of ball is going into that Cork inside line. And same flip side in, we know Jamie Barron, he seems to, when he hits form, he seems to bring up all the rest of his players, raise their game, say 8 or 9 sort of tenor performances. So an intriguing contest around the middle of the park, which could have a big bearing.
Yes, but look at they're two guys that you know, they're the prototype modern midfielders, but that ability to get up and down the field, pace, athleticism. Yeah, look at two really quality players, and you know, both managers will hope that these guys can find form at the right time, given how important they've been to Cork and Waterford respectively. Yeah, Jim, listen, it's like sometimes, you know, a new manager, you know, you get the biggest bounce in the first year. I think we've seen that over the years, you know, and there seems to be, again, obviously a real disappointment, I suppose, you know, in the Waterford camp and at how their season went last year. And, you know, I think the players themselves, I suppose, have to take a bit of responsibility for that and the way the year panned out. So I think there'll be a resolve there, you know, to show that, you know, last year simply wasn't good enough from their perspective. Cork, again, obviously, look at headed to Croke Park last year with a lot of, I suppose, maybe, you know, hope and expectation and so on. And, you know, again, failed to deliver against Kilkenny. And again, you know, there was through no fault of Horgan, as you mentioned. I mean, he was absolutely outstanding. But defensively, again, there's still kind of question marks. There's still question marks about Cork when it really comes down to it and it really becomes a battle. You know, are they capable of winning those really tight matches? I think there's a lot of talent in that Cork team. There's a lot of pace, a lot of athleticism. I fancy them to beat Waterford, but you know, I don't say that with any massive conviction, because I think Waterford will bring a huge challenge, and obviously it's a semi-final. It's, you know, there's a huge prize at stake in terms of, you know, getting to that Munster final and what it means. So yeah, Cork narrowly. And if Cork get to the Munster final, you know, and if we see the best of this Cork team, well, then it's they on their day they're capable of beating anybody. But you know, I just don't know what Waterford will turn up, and I think that Waterford have found a couple of players, I think, as well that you know, I'm looking forward to seeing. But Cork narrowly, Jim. But not say with a whole lot of conviction.
I suppose, Tomas, normally these games are determined on form. I suppose, looking on from a Cork point of view, you have Ballygunner that have been rampant in Waterford, and there's going to be an awful lot of strong contingent of the Ballygunner side represented in Waterford side, and those guys are used to winning games and momentum, and there's going to be so many of those Ballygunner games that won't have lads that are on the Waterford team that won't have tasted defeat in a long time, and they're so used to playing with each other. Is that obviously a worry for Cork, that the Ballygunner lads themselves could upset the apple cart and really take the challenge to Cork?
Yeah, I suppose it is. And look, it's probably a worry for Kieran Kingston in terms of, look, we're already at semi-final stage in the Cork County Championships with senior and intermediate and Premier Intermediate and other intermediate. So there's a lot of inter-county guys are still playing with away with their club. So I know he would probably like to have the Cork County Championship finish sooner to get everybody back from an inter-county scene. But it is what it is. But yeah, look, Ballygunner have been an incredible club team, and they've been a joy to watch. They have a certain style. I think we played them last year in a challenge match, and they were just incredible just to stand in the bank and look what they did, because every player knew what was happening, knew when to run and take a ball off a fella's shoulder, how to back up. They got bottled up. They knew just to turn and put the ball out to wing because they knew there was a spare man coming from wing back or from midfield to pick it up. And they have that great understanding. But what they haven't done though from Waterford is transform that into the Waterford setup for when it comes to the big day and for the big match day of the last couple of years. But look, we've seen in the past Waterford and Cork bring out the best of each other. They've been high scoring, freestyle games. Whether you're going to get that at the end of October, early November, it remains to be seen. It could turn out like a National League match in terms of weather, because you get a downpour of rain, you get a cold night, and look, we've all been standing on the terraces on nights like that, and it can be very, very difficult for players. So it's this championship, this Munster championship, it's so different to everything else that we've seen. And I agree with Jamesie there in terms of Cork. Defensively, I still don't think we know who our number 3 is going to be, who our number 6 is going to be. And I think that has been our Achilles heel over the years, is getting a dominant number 6 and getting a dominant number 3 that actually can say, these are my positions. I'm going to be here for the next couple of years. We've too many changes back there. The forward line in itself nearly picks itself with Horgan, Harnedy, Cadigan, Lehan. You know, there's the mix is there, and Darragh Fitzgibbon in the middle of the field, who will partner him. I mean, he's been a tremendous player for us. But I think defensively, yeah, the questions are still about Cork back in defence. And unless we actually, and that's why I think our game plan for us in Cork, I think every team around the country has actually spotted the way Cork play their game in terms of going sharp with the puck out to the corner back, trying to take it through the lines. And I think that was typified by Kilkenny last year. Richie Hogan was struggling for injury. I didn't give Kilkenny much of a chance of coming out of Leinster, not alone getting to an All-Ireland final. And when I looked at Richie Hogan getting in corner forward and Shani Donoghue, because he knew every time he got a puck out, he wasn't going to strike it. He was going to run with the ball. And every time he threw up in the hurley, there was Richie Hogan just to flick the ball away. I think he scored 1-2 and he dispossessed them 5 times to get scores out of it. I think Cork need to change because the opposition have copped the game and the style that we play. And I think I'd love to see a bit more directness, a bit more use of the ball out of defence much quicker than going across the field, short ball. And I think, Stephen, you mentioned that last 10, 15 minutes against Limerick. I think we caused a lot of our own problems by losing possession back in defence when we were 5 points up and the ball should have been gone down the field further. I hope that kind of change is there this year, because it doesn't. I think it leads to questions again about us conceding soft scores, giving away very, very easy frees when we lose possession back in defence. We're high scoring, getting huge points, but there's no point, as a fella said, trying to close the door when the horse is bolted, the barn door when the horse is bolted, because if you're conceding at the other end, you're never going to win the match.
I suppose if I can move on now to Ken, I suppose Tomas mentioned that full forward line there, Seamus Harnedy, Patrick Horgan, Alan Cadigan, possibly Conor Lehan. I suppose many people will look at that and say the Waterford full back line will have to stand up to that. And you're probably talking 3 of probably the best goal getters in the game, probably 3 of the probably most guys with blessed with pace. I suppose for Waterford to be successful, I suppose, is it a case of stopping that ball going in? Because if the ball goes into those 3, you might stop one of them, but to stop all 3 of them, that very few teams can do that. I say you might quieten one of them, but quieten all 3. If you quieten Horgan, Cadigan catch fire. If you quieten Cadigan, you have Harnedy and Lehan. And I suppose for Waterford, their back 6 is going to have a big bearing on this contest, I presume.
To be honest with you, I think Waterford's had to focus on their own game. I think that could be maybe a problem with a lot of inter-county teams at the moment, Jim. Everyone's trying to play the same way. And there's 1 or 2 teams that are actually further ahead of playing this way, you know. And I think Waterford have to come up with their own style. We have to come up with something that works for us. I think you were saying the Ballygorra lads. There'll only be 3 Ballygorra lads playing the championship against Cork. You'll have Socky, Stephen O'Keefe, Pádraig Manny and Young Hutchison. So that's all you'd have from that team, you know. We have to, I suppose it's 3 years now since we won a game. The league nearly feels, I don't know what year, it feels like last year, I suppose, at this stage, you know. So I think we have to kind of focus on ourselves The one thing was, as Eamonn said about Liam Cahill, he was a tough man playing. He'd cut the head off you playing. He was a very good hurler. But I remember when they lost in the Munster final against Cork, he said after the game that was the first time ever that team never turned up for him. That's a fair statement, because every team he had, and he had the same team for minor, a couple of 3 months, always turned up for him and always produced performance. I don't think he'd accept that unless, and I think hurling people in Waterford expect that from this team this year. We need to show lads with a bit more, I suppose, fight for that match, a bit more mettle in their performance. In all fairness, Austin came back with the club this year. He's in unbelievable shape. He was brilliant for the club this year. He was brilliant in every game for us. And he stood up. He looks like he's eager and really wants to probably put 1 or 2, I wouldn't say bad years, but years that probably he didn't produce as good as he could behind him, and really kind of drive on this team, which he did for our Country 1 team a few years ago. So look, I think Cork would be favourites going into this, but as Tomas, I think Waterford and Cork always bring the best of one another. For years, it was a team we always enjoyed playing against. We always felt, look, if we get up over Cork, we'd be fancier, because as good as their forwards are, and they are very good, at times they can be, you'd love to see them stand up more, because every one of them forwards for Cork if on their day can destroy you. 7 points up against Limerick in 2018. Limerick gets the next 7 points on the trot, I think, from the 63rd minute on. It probably a real team that knew how to see out them games wouldn't even happen. But they have the potential to do damage to you. But we don't know. No one knows. There's no form as you're going into this. Club champions are on for the last good few months, last good few weeks. They're over. There are very few little challenge games, I don't think. We're meant to play Dublin last Saturday. It was called off over Dublin full of COVID. We've no COVID down here anymore. We're grand. But so there's no challenge games. We don't really know what's going to happen. There's limited amount of training sessions. So it really is a kind of one-off game. And over the years, one-off games, at times we can perform in them, It's consistently for the year we can struggle. But one-off games, anything is possible. Yet I do think that Cork are favourites.
I suppose the other semi-final will see the victors of Clare versus Limerick. We'll have home advantage against Tipperary. I suppose we're not going to probably presume who's going to come through that, because that is all presumption. We're just maybe talk about Tipperary's chances in the Munster Hurling Championship. Just mainly focus on Tipperary now for the next minute or so. So we'll come back to Eamonn, I suppose. It's Tipperary going into that semi-final, having seen the first game, and obviously whoever your opposition are. What do you think the mood is going to be in the Tipperary camp in terms of the Munster Championship?
All the lads have said it there. A lot of this is unknown. To be honest with you, all we can do is go on the form of the lads that we've seen in the club championship. We haven't seen them in league form, or they haven't been playing together. And in fairness to that, there's different views, have teams been trained or not, but I know for a fact in Tipperary, nothing has been going until the championship is finished, and Liam is getting it back together now. He's let them go and play with the clubs, and I think across most counties that's been happening. So it's still going into the unknown. We're going back to how they performed really in the All-Ireland final last year. Showed a slight bit of form. The league, but I think if we look at last year, the All-Ireland final, there's probably 2 or 3 positions up for grabs. I think there's a midfield spot that may be up for grabs. I think Bubbles of the Wire is really going to struggle. He's only played 20 minutes of hurling, as I said already. But then you're back to the regulars there. And I think what I do like with Tipperary, and Tomas spoke about it there, find a number 3 and a number 6 for Cork. What I saw last year and what Liam has instilled in the team, actually there's no set 3, 6 in Tipperary, or like they all rotate. Look, Ronan Maher played fullback for a lot of last year. Then in the final, Barry Heffernan went in there. Paddy Maher played 6, played 5. Brendan Maher stepped into 6. Cahill Barrett went from 2 to 5. So that's the one thing I do like about this team. They're well able to rotate when they have to throughout the positions. But I think if we are going to progress this year, there's 2 or 3 positions we have to find. And the one player I'd like to see coming in this year is Jake Morris. He's after having a Super Club Championship. He's one of those players that you get in your feet when you watch him play, and he's good for goals. He's a top of the ground hurler. That's the only thing with the conditions. Will he stand up from a physicality point of view? But I think he's someone that will add something different to the forward line this year. But outside of that, I can't see too many changes. I think he will go in a lot of form the lads showed last year in the All-Ireland. And in fairness, when they go down through the team there, they did perform well for the club, each and every one of them. So that's a good sign.
I suppose, Stephen, if Limerick merge victorious, they're going to meet the traditional foe, Tipperary. What are your thoughts on Tipperary? And obviously, we know they're stacked with quality. And Eamonn mentioned about youngsters getting their chance, but we've always seen the likes of Noel McGrath, Seamus Conlan, John McGrath to the fore. Do you think, obviously, there's a new crop of Tipperary hurlers coming through that could pose a threat to Limerick?
Yeah, there is. The Tip did fantastic to win that 121 championship against a fancy Cork team. They blooded a few of their players, especially in the latter stages of the match against Wexford last year. But to be honest, the standout with Tipperary is the quality of their forwards. Their peripheral vision at finding each other, their stick work, but ultimately their accuracy. They're so clinical. They're the most clinical set of forwards that in the country. You've got the likes of TJ Reid, like would be of that caliber, Joe Canning and that. But as a unit, the Tipperary forward unit are very, very potent and very, very difficult to stop. So it's hard to break into that. I think it'll be a lot like Limerick. Limerick seem to have their set. It'll be near enough the same enough team as last year. I think Tip will be something similar, possibly one or two changes, possibly, but not many. Another thing that Tip have going from is their management. I think their management team is excellent. Liam Sheedy is a fantastic motivator and organizer. You've got Eamon O'Shea there, who's got the genius and the technical and the planning for the hurling style. And then you've got Tommy Dunn, who's a fantastic coach. And then Owen Kelly, who brings, you know, he's younger. And so he's played with some of these lads, or he'd be closer in age anyway. But they all bring their own different thing. And he definitely will add to the management team. I think Tip will be very, very difficult to beat. The one thing I would say is when you win in All-Ireland, I think that, or when you win in any sport and you win that title, the following year, only the greatest teams don't lose that maybe 1 or 2%, maybe that edge or that hunger. Can they replicate it the following year? I don't think Tip have put back-to-back All-Irelands together for a long, long time. The fact that the championship, there's been a break with COVID and the club championships come, and all that time has been since they won it last year. I think that's actually a plus for Tipperary for this year. So it'll come in almost like last year's All-Ireland win has been so long ago, it's nearly forgotten. A lot of teams, when they win the All-Ireland, they spend the winter celebrating it, you know, and they might have lost that edge. But I don't think that will be the case for Tip. So I think they'll be strong. They'll be for the benefit of that this year. And because they're so physically strong as well, I think winter hurling will actually benefit them too.
I suppose, Jamesie, if Clare emerged victorious over Limerick, we know what we saw the last time when Tipperary came to Cusack Park and Liam Sheedy was on the sideline. It was a dark day, dare I say, for Clare hurling that day. It was over before it began, I'd say, is a fair statement. So I suppose, what are your thoughts on Tipperary?
Yeah, well, we're delighted to have the opportunity to take Tip on in the semi-final, because we'd obviously have one put over Limerick, but we crossed that bridge if we come to it, Jim. Listen, like Tip, yeah, on their day, sure. I mean, you know, we saw last year what they're capable of, but we also saw in the Munster final, you know, they had an off day and, you know, I mean, Wexford literally had 1 foot, I think, in the All-Ireland final. And it was testament, I suppose, to the resolve and the character, the you know, how deep Tip had to dig. And the leadership, I think, particularly that the you know, the two Mahers and the three Mahers in the half-back line brought that, you know, that got them to the final. So, you know, look at Tip, we all know the quality that they have. But we also saw last year that, you know, if Tip dipped below a certain level, well then, listen, certainly Limerick had their number and Wexford could have had their number as well. So I think the big positive from their perspective, you know, was that, look, obviously they've had, you know, Noel McGrath, Callan, you know, the Mahers, Bonner obviously is back. They've had that core of players and the leadership that they bring. But those guys, you know, the younger players that came in last year, that got a taste of the big time and saw firsthand, you know, what it takes, you know, what's required. And then obviously to get a taste of you know, the big days in Croke Park and winning in Ireland, that's massive, because you know, those guys now haven't been there. We want more of that, and that means there's pressure obviously then on the guys that are in that starting 15. So Look, to me, Tip and Limerick are the two best teams in the country. And, you know, we're assuming that, you know, they will meet in the semi-final, and it's arguably the game of the year. And if Tip are their very, very best, and Limerick bring their best, it's going to be a hell of a game. And look at Jim, regardless of how it goes, you know, both of these teams I think are going to be in the shake-up, and certainly in the last four at the end of the season. You know, can Conlan and Pádraig Maher and Brendan Maher and Noel McGrath continue to play at the levels they've played at over the last decade? You know, that's a challenge because there's a lot of mileage on those clocks. But if those guys, you know, bring the form of last year, you know, with the young talent that they've got, you know, coming through, and the class they have in front, yeah, look at they're along with Limerick, the team that everyone has to beat.
I suppose, Tomas, if I can come to you now, in terms of your views on Tipperary.
Yeah, look, I think all the lads have mentioned it. Yeah, they are a formidable outfit, right? I think what I would probably think needs to happen with Tipperary is obviously serious competition in the camp up to now, in terms of the guys that have been there and be there for a long time. James, you mentioned about, like, you know, Brendan Maher, Pádraig Maher, you know, Bonham Maher coming into the equation, Bubbles. Is there guys pushing these guys? Is there guys pushing these guys and say, I want your place? Because that's the best way to have it. And you've seen with Kilkenny over the years, you win in All-Ireland the previous year, there's no guarantee that you'll be in the starting 15 the next year. And Cody had that habit of introducing one or two new players, new bit of blood into the fray on an annual basis, on a regular basis. And I think Sheedy needs to do that as well, you know. James, you mentioned Wexford. I mean, Tip we're gone against Wexford in the All-Ireland semi-final. I think Wexford made a hash of it themselves. It wasn't Tip's ability on the day. I think it was Wexford lost that game themselves. So you look at that, and if you're the opposition, you say maybe we can still get at this Tipperary defence. We can still take on a Pádraig Maher. We can still get through Brendan Maher. Have the new blood to come in, and if they are lacking a bit in that department, have they got the replacements to come in and say somebody can step up at left half back or at centre back? And look, they've had their success at under 21 level as well, so there is a combination of good players there, you know. So yeah, look, you mentioned Tip and Limerick are the teams maybe most people maybe expect to be contesting the latter stages of the year, to be honest with you. And yeah, I think Sheedy, more than anything else, he's driven by this thing that they haven't put back-to-back All-Irelands. They've won brilliant All-Irelands in a given year, but the following year has been a disaster for them. And I think that's one that he wants to remedy, and that's one that he wants to put right. And with Eamonn O'Shea, I'd say all summer long, that's where the plan is. That is where the guidelines are heading towards. And as Stephen mentioned, if it was in April or May, they might not have recovered from 2019. They've had a long time now. This is a new championship starting in October. So, yeah, you would expect them to be fresh and ready for road.
I suppose, Ken, the defending champions, Tipperary, not defending Munster champions, but defending All-Ireland champions, are they the team to beat in terms of the Munster Championship this year, never alone the All-Ireland?
No, to me, I think Limerick are the team to beat. Tip were deservedly All-Ireland winners last year. I thought they were great in the All-Ireland final. As the lad said, the All-Ireland semi-final, Wexford threw it away, to be honest with you. To be a man up and to go again away from the game they were playing for a few years was crazy. But the big lads from Tip did stand up. Pádraig Maher, Brendan Maher, Bonner, these lads, they're not getting any younger. And they're actually unbelievable players for the last 10, 11 years. Like, that have been through so many matches, so many big games in Croke Park. Do you know how to win? Some of them lads have 3 All-Ireland medals, which is some achievement. But have they them fellas to come through and really push them on? Or as Eamonn said, Jake Morris was very good. Jake Morris has great potential. He needs to step up this year. I didn't see many club games in Tip to see if there's many that will push the lads on a small bit again. Like, even look at Liverpool, who cruised through a Premiership last year. They had to buy in and bring in a couple more players to keep fellas on their toes, to keep fellas fresh, to keep fellas like fighting for positions. You know, Sheedy's brilliant. Liam Sheedy's brilliant. Tomas would have done a good bit of stuff with RT with him as well. There's something about him. He demands respect when you talk to him, and he's a sound chap. Don't get me wrong, but he demands it, and I think it's a difference. You saw even the shape of Bubbles last year, I suppose, when he came onto the championship. He was fit. There was no messing with Liam Sheedy, and also he knows what he wants, and he's driven for this 2 in a row. They have unbelievable hurlers who can, some unbelievable stick men. 4 or 5 passes in a row, balls over the bar. Some of the scores they're getting, you say that's incredible. But when did it break down against Limerick in the Munster final? They looked very ordinary. And at times against Wexford, they looked ordinary as well. They dug it out. But they can be bet. Like every team can be bet. There's no probably, dare I say, a team like the Kenny back in the 2000s who at times were unbeatable. It's going to be a good championship picture with 2 or 3 teams speed. They can have the better of one another. But me, Limerick would be my pick for Munster with Tip just behind, and the other 3 on their day have a chance. But to me, that's what I'd be going for.
I suppose, lads, for the last 30 seconds now, I'm just going to ask you to say who's going to be your. So who's going to be your
first cup of tea?
Jesus, man.
So who's going to be your Munster final? Who's going to contest the Munster final on Sunday, November the 15th at 4 p.m. and who's going to emerge victorious? So we're going to keep it short and sweet, and we're going to start with the Tipperary point of view. So Eamonn Corcoran, Sunday, November the 15th at 4 p.m. Who's going to be in the Munster final? And at the end of 60 minutes, or dare I say, after extra time even, who's going to emerge victorious?
I'll keep it very short. Once this isn't going out in Tipperary, I would say Limerick and Cork final, with Limerick to see it out. Okay,
so we'll move on now to Stephen Lucey. Same bullet pointed at a gun at your face, and time to make the call.
I keep it shorter. I agree with Eamonn. As Liam Brady says, I agree with Eamonn.
Okay, so now we're on to Clare. Jamesie, are you going to keep the banner flag flying, or are you going to agree with your colleagues?
Yeah, I agree with Stephen.
You agree with Stephen?
Limerick.
Yeah, Jamesie.
No, we're just like Limerick. Like Limerick may have burnt a bit of energy too, Jim. And that'll hopefully be a right battle with Clare. I mean, we'll give them lots of it. And obviously, then it's a massive game with Tipperary, and there's a possibility that like whoever's coming in from the other side, meet a flatter Limerick on the day. So they'll definitely, like Cork, if they're there, definitely have a chance. But for me, yeah, Limerick, the team they all have to beat.
Tomas, people are saying you will get to a Munster final. If you get there, who will you be meeting, and will you emerge victorious?
Sure, of course, I have to go against all these boys, and I'm going to say it's Tipperary and Cork in a Munster final.
Tipperary and Cork in a Munster final. And are you going to take down the All-Ireland champions in a Munster final?
Joe Hayes will score the winner and do a catch tumble.
Yeah, I believe Sheedy hasn't been training, big time.
I suppose, Ken, I suppose you have to win one game to get to a Munster final. Will you get there? And if you get there, who are you going to be playing? And are you going to will you be raising the cup after 60 minutes?
It'll be Limerick and Waterford in the Munster final. Yeah. We'll take care of Cork in winter hurl. Handy enough. All right, Tomas?
Yeah, but there'll be no lifting the cup after 60 minutes, though. You'll have to go the full length of time, yeah?
So what we have, lads, before I let you go, there seems to be a universal opinion that it's going to be Limerick or Tipperary that are going to be the Munster champions. And lastly, do you think we'll see an all-Munster, All-Ireland final? Is that a possibility this year, or will we at least see one Munster team in the All-Ireland final? So I'm just going to go for last 10 seconds. I'm just going to come and say what team you think it will be, and if so, will they be in an All-Ireland final? So, Eamonn, do you think there will be a Munster team in the All-Ireland final?
It's all about Limerick this year, Stephen.
Okay.
Limerick
Stephen, will there be a Munster team in the All-Ireland final?
Come on, Eamonn, boy. Pass the old favouritism tag, yeah. Fair play to you. You're doing a great job.
So So, Jamesie, will we see a Munster team in the All-Ireland hurling final?
Yeah, we might see two, yeah.
Might see two. Tomas, will we see a Munster team in the All-Ireland hurling final?
Of course we'll see one, yeah, but I won't tell you who it is, though.
And lastly, Ken, will we see a Munster team in the All-Ireland hurling final?
Will.
On that note, I would like to thank our guests this evening. Eamonn Corcoran representing Tipperary, Stephen Lucey representing Limerick, Jamesie O'Connor representing Clare, Tomas Mulcahy representing Cork, and Ken McGrath representing Waterford for our exclusive Munster Hurling Championship preview. They call it the COVID Championship, the COVID 2020 Intercounty. We've had the Club Championship, now we prepare and wait for the Intercounty Championship. Do a reminder that this show will go out on RCB Radio Sport, West Clare, live at 92.5 and 94.8 FM, and online at www.rcb.ie. You can also see this show will be put up on our YouTube channel. So for anyone that wants to see this show live, they'll be able to see it on our YouTube channel. For me, Jim Conlan, I would like to say thanks to all our guests. Good evening. Good night wherever you are, and hopefully we'll have a productive Munster Hurling Championship. Take care, guys, and thanks a million.
Keep washing the hands, lads. Well done. Fair play.